leverage existing external resources such as technology to get into market spaces. In fact, if you have a lot of resources, that may be a disadvantage because you have to continuously upkeep and finance them. So this is one of the things that in a crisis is a really empowering observation, because this is when we do not have access to sufficient resources or the usual resources. So we need to understand that that's not what really matters. What matters is our ability to understand which way lifestyles, work styles are moving, and understand how to use existing resources that are available to us inside and outside of our companies. So one company that gets this really well is Samsung, which is one of the world's leading consumer electronics companies. And they were also started during a crisis in the 1930s during Japanese occupation as a dry fish shop. So just as a simple food store. And now they are one of the top companies in South Korea and one of the leading consumer electronics in the world. Within consumer electronics, they first started just making simple transistor radios, and then they got into other electronics, but they defined their business as life care, which is a really interesting concept well beyond electronics. And their CEO says that we manage by perpetual crisis. We know that we need to change everything but our families in this world of continuous disruption, and that everything we do today will be gone in 10 years. And this mindset allows the company to get into all kinds of new businesses well outside of what they're doing today. So they're getting into solar panels, medical devices, biotech, drugs, because they understand that they are in a environment that no longer has boundaries. And if that's the case, then they can get into all kinds of new businesses if they are the first ones there. So now we understand that we want to view the current crisis as a form of extreme disruption. We want to therefore have a culture, an entire organizational approach based on the idea of continuous movement and perpetual crisis. How do we do this? And this is where the role of this wonderful resource that is available to everybody, that is absolutely free and incredibly powerful, comes in, and that's creativity. So here's my second poll question to you. And as students, you can answer this either for yourselves. So think about creativity in your studies, or think about the workplace. So think about whether you think creativity is important for work. Do you consider yourself to be creative? And do you think that workplace in general or university studies in general encourage creativity or not? So let's do the first one. Creativity is important for my work. Very overwhelming response. Looks like pretty much everybody agrees with that. Excellent. So let's end this first poll. Let's move on to the second one. I consider myself to be creative. Curious what you think about yourself, whether you think that's true or not. Excellent. So again, most everybody thinks of themselves as being creative. That's really, really encouraging. So let's end this poll as well and move on to the third one. My workplace encourages creativity. So you can think about workplace, or you can think about universities in general. Do you think universities encourage creative thinking? All right. So again, looks like a very dominant response, positive response, that most everyone, at least it looks like 3/4, 75% think that universities or workplaces in general encourage creativity. Very interesting. Let's end the poll and show you this study. which was a survey of 100,000 people working in different industries around the world. So overwhelmingly, as almost everybody thinks that creativity is important for work. Less than half of people surveyed think of themselves as creative. And look at this, only 2% think that their workplace actually encourages creativity. So there's a huge disconnect between what we perceive as a critical component to our work, creativity, and what is actually encouraged and nurtured by companies. I love this quote by Albert Einstein, who said the following: imagination is everything. It is the preview to life's coming attractions. A beautiful statement. But again, let's reflect on how we view the current crisis. Most of you said that this crisis will create a whole new world full of opportunities. Well, then what this means is that this is our chance, therefore, to use our imagination, as Einstein said, to imagine life's coming attractions. Imagine what the world will be like in the wake of the COVID crisis, and let's get our company to be the first in that space. And that's where the opportunity lies. Now, Thomas Edison, who was one of the greatest inventors of history, was once asked, Mr. Edison, what do you think is the greatest invention of all time? And he had an immediate answer to this. So he didn't have to think about it, or he actually thought about it before. What do you think he said? Well, his response was, the greatest invention is the mind of a child. What an interesting response, right? So he didn't respond by specifying a certain product, a certain thing that was invented, but he went to the source of it all and he said the source of everything that has been invented and where it all starts is in the mind that children possess, right? And why would he say that? So again, I like to give you a quick anecdote, and this is from my personal life when I was a child. This was told to me by my parents that apparently I was around 2 years old, and I was playing with small cars on a coffee table, and out of the corner of my eye, a fly landed on the table and caught my attention. And perhaps it was the first time that I was so close to such an insect, and I tried to reach out to touch it, and it disappeared. And my reaction was to look under the table where it fell, but I didn't see it there. So this happened 3 or 4 times. Same thing. The fly landed near me. I tried to reach out to touch it. It disappeared. I looked under the table, didn't see it. But the fourth time this happened and the fly disappeared, I didn't look down. I looked around and I saw it on the wall next to me. Now, if you think about this short, brief snapshot, on one hand, what a common occurrence this was. This happened to all of us, all of you, as you were children. This is how we learned the world. This is how we got to understand how things function, right? But from another perspective, what a profound moment it was, because my entire understanding of the world was changed. I had an entire paradigm shift in the way that I processed my environment. And what Thomas Edison was referencing, therefore, is this ability that we had as children to be not just curious, but to have an open mind and to always explore and be flexible in our thinking to new ideas and new concepts. And I think that's what he was talking about, which is also why Peter Mernholz, who is one of the leading customer experience experts today, says something that resonates completely with Edison's observation, that everything you need to know about innovation you learned in kindergarten, right? It's that sort of thinking that we need to engage. Now, how do we do that? How do we engage creative thinking so that it's not abstract, so it's not just brainstorming, but the systematic application of creative thinking? And this is where the concept of slingshot that I created comes in. It's precisely geared to address this issue. So, as was mentioned in my very gracious introduction, My background is with Blue Ocean Strategy. So I was one of the core original experts. And for over 10 years, I was a blue oceanographer that went around the world helping organizations understand and apply this concept. And the whole image of blue ocean is all about creating your own market space that you have all to yourself. So it's a beautiful image and it's a wonderful strategic goal for any organization. But in reality, this is what I found, that while most companies would love to be in the blue ocean, very few were able to make the transition from the shark infested, very competitive red oceans. They were stuck in between the two. Why do you think this is? Why could they not make this move? Well, it was because of this, that most organizations are not equipped to understand how to transform themselves, how to get into new space. And if they find a new space, even if they even identify a new blue ocean, they have the thinking that they need to abandon where they are today. So they see a trade-off. Do we get into a completely untested new market space that may be very high potential and lucrative for us? Or do we stay in the space that we know and we're comfortable in, even though there's not much growth and it's really competitive? And when you see it like this, you tend to be more conservative and you pull back. And so I launched Slingshot as a way to address this and to say that you do not need to see the world in terms of this trade-off, that you can actually systematically use creativity in your organization and to both grow your current business as well as get into new market spaces. So Slingshot, even the symbol, is all about thinking and reminding us of our childhood, because Slingshot is a universal symbol of childhood playing and creativity. And even the mechanics of a slingshot is such that you pull back against the elastic that launches forward a projectile, the same way that you would pull back against these self-imposed mental boundaries. And when you do that, it launches you forward continuously into new spaces of high potential and limitless possibilities. At the very core of Slingshot is a very simple question. What do people want? What does a person want most in life? Okay, because ultimately, at the end of every business relationship, are people, are final end consumers. And we need to understand what matters to them in order to be relevant, in order to have a relationship with them, right? And if you're focused on communication, this is key for you. How do you establish an ongoing rapport and relationship and be able to maintain that? So the answer that I love to this question is was given by a former Army psychologist who said, the human equation is to multiply joy and divide pain. And then he went on to say, pain shared is pain divided, joy shared is joy multiplied. I think this is a beautiful statement, but it's also a critical one for any business, because I challenge any organization that I work with. And that's true in business. It's true in government when I work with various governments, as well as in academia when I work with universities. I challenge them to think of themselves as being in the business of multiplying joy and dividing pain for their stakeholders. And that is their customers, that is their internal customers, so that everybody that works for them, as well as their communities. And if you can activate and deliver on this statement, then you will be relevant. And in fact, you will be indispensable to all these stakeholders. Okay? So, with that said, the three key Slingshot components to actually deliver on this are the following. And again, I like the idea of simplicity and simplification. So it's just these three concepts. And if an organization gets good at activating these three concepts, they will be the future shapers. They will continuously create blue ocean market spaces. The first and most important is learning to identify customer pain points and to continuously turn them into points of delight and joy. The second is continuously stretching the definition of what you do. In other words, always think about what value do I provide for my customers and how do I expand on that. And number three, embrace what I call the innovation shortcut. Instead of inventing something, just look for new combinations of already existing resources. So here are a couple of examples during this crisis, turning pain points into points of delight. Groupon is a great example. So again, in the wake of the last crisis, Groupon provided a way to take a key pain point, so things that were bothering people at the time, which is that they didn't have enough money to enjoy local service providers such as restaurants, movie theaters, fitness centers. It gave them a way to do that by offering daily a whole daily menu of deals and promotions using leveraging technology to do this online and virtually, so that they could again start enjoying local venues. So it transformed a pain point formed by the last crisis into a point of delight, as people were really thrilled and looking forward to receiving their Groupon deals every single day. During the current crisis, Walmart did something very much along these lines, which is to convert the parking lots in their supermarkets into outdoor movie theaters, right? So people are again stuck at home. They have no place to go, and they have little forms of entertainment. So understanding this, Walmart again transformed the pain point into a point of delight and looked at its own resources and said, how can I activate something that will allow people to enjoy themselves? Now, in terms of the idea of expanding the value of what we provide, the second point, a good example is British American Tobacco, which is one of the leading manufacturers of cigarettes in the world. But did you know that BAT is also at the front lines of developing a vaccine for COVID-19? Why? Because it turns out that tobacco has special qualities that would allow the vaccine to be administered or to be produced cheaply and purely and at room temperature. So, if this company only thought of itself as being in the business of manufacturing cigarettes, it would never come up with this idea. But when you expand the definition of what you do, in this case, using tobacco for human consumption, then you see the possibilities open up. And in this case, it even would help the company to go from being in the business of doing something that is actually harmful to human health to actually something that is very much promoting well-being and positive human health. An example of the third point is about the innovation shortcut, combining things in new ways. Is this hotel from Amsterdam, Netherlands, which of course understands that people are just not coming to hotels right now. No one is traveling, but there is a need, a new demand by local businesses for an environment that is fun, that is absolutely safe, so sanitary and well equipped. So they are reconfiguring their hotel rooms into workspaces like this, combining the best of their traditional hotel rooms with well equipped offices and even gyms, as you can see in this picture, that are fun to work in. So those are quick examples of these key concepts. So transitioning now to the second to last point is, how do we now activate these concepts in the current crisis so that we identify opportunities and do it in a way that minimizes our need for resources and keeps all of our staff engaged? So an interesting question to ask, building on the previous point, is how good do you think companies are in removing customer pain points? After all, this is exactly what key leaders of our times are telling us. Steve Jobs said, You've got to start with the consumer experience and work backwards. It's not about technology, it's about that experience. Bill Gates is telling us your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning. Yet, look at this statistic. In a single year in the US, which is arguably the most customer centric market in the world, angry customers cost the economy almost $6 trillion, which is over 1/3 of the entire output of the economy. And it affected over half of all consumers. Now, what is causing this friction, the frustration and pain? It's things that everybody has experienced. It's having to contact companies multiple times, waiting too long, inconsistent experiences, being promised one thing and delivering another, right? So what this is telling us that overall companies are actually awful, terrible at understanding the customer journey, the customer experience, and the key points of frustration and pain that they are feeling. What this is also telling us that if we have a company that gets this, that can actually activate this, then we will again be set apart. We will be able to create blue oceans. So therefore, what we want to understand is that our mission as an organization is to turn pain points into points of delight and joy. And during this crisis, you can see all kinds of opportunities for this because all kinds of pain points are being created. So, one example of this is what's now called online work gyms. So, one of the key uh, effects of the current crisis, people are working at home. Yet that's a difficult environment to work in. So, people are finding it difficult to be motivated, to stay engaged, to be creative. So work gyms are these online courses that have started during the current crisis that are a combination of personal coaching, of webinars, and fitness classes in actual gyms. And what they do is they teach people how to better structure and how to work with accountability, how to spark creativity, and to be productive at home. So, this is exactly activating the concept that I'm talking about. And finally, number 6 is how do we, once we understand and start to really harness the power of this sort of mindset and cultural shift, how do we actually use a crisis to reach new levels of success? So again, one big advantage we have is that everyone that works with us understands that standing still is not an option. So everybody is much more open to this idea of creative thinking and contributing to your creative ideation as an organization. And you can take advantage of that. So one example of how powerful this is the story of T-Mobile USA and its former CEO, John Laguerre, who just stepped down. So he was the CEO for the last 8 years, and he took over the company when it was left for dead. So nobody thought that it had any chance because right before his assumption of the leadership position, a deal fell through with AT&T, and they were stuck as the number 4 provider. The other 3 ahead of them were much better quality, much better market standing. So nobody thought that they would have a chance. But John didn't look at it this way. He looked at this crisis as an opportunity, as a personal challenge. And he launched what he called the Uncarrier campaign. And just by that simple title, he signaled that we're going to do something completely different and unlike everybody else. And as you can see, even the way he looks, he has long hair, he dresses in pink and black leather, and he speaks very frankly and very in a very humorous way. It was all about challenging the status quo. And what his Uncarrier campaign did is very quickly move the company up to 3rd position. And in fact, now they have just acquired the 3rd biggest company, Sprint, so they can now go head to head with the top 2 players. And his entire campaign was based on identifying key customer pain points and turning them into point of delight. So, for example, before his campaign, mobile phone companies had very complicated contracts. So he offered very simple contracts. Before the Un-carrier campaign, there were all kinds of fees for additional uses and charges. And he introduced the unlimited plan. Before the Un-carrier campaign, you had to pay a penalty or a fee if you switched phones before a certain period of time was up. And what he did is said, you can switch anytime. So this is the power of understanding the customer experience, the key pain points they're feeling, and then doing something about it. And by the way, when you do this right in terms of communication, it resonates with the public, with your customers, which is why he personally has an online fan base of over 6.5 million people. So during the crisis, this is the perfect time for every single organization to step up and to communicate a positive message of caring, of support for everybody else. And we see many examples. So the Texas Roadhouse CEO announced that he's foregoing his own personal salary to help workers in the company. LVMH, the big French luxury company, has converted its factory to produce large quantities of hand sanitizers for free. So they're doing their part to help. Or Apple CEO Tim Cook announced that it is making a substantial contribution to first responders in Italy. So as you can see, the view that is continuously expanding from our company to our community to our entire country or to the world as a community. And this is the opportunity that we have to really make connections with communities that otherwise we would not have access to outside of a crisis like this. So here's my final poll to you as communication majors. So let's assume for a moment that you are part of the senior executive team at Corona Beer, and you're in charge of communication. So you're the communication director for Corona Beer. Would you see the current crisis because of the name association as a major threat or problem, as a significant opportunity, or having no significant impact on the company? Which one do you see? Very interesting, and again, very encouraging, because most all of you see this as a significant opportunity. So let me end the poll, and again, almost 95% of you think that way, and you're absolutely right, because that is the way that I think as well. But unfortunately, this is not how Corona Beer saw the current crisis. So when Corona hit, there were many rumors in the news, such as this survey that you see, that people were going to stop drinking Corona. There was even rumors that the beer contained the virus itself, all negative publicity. So what did Corona Beer do? Absolutely nothing. They stay silent, even though they have an online fan base of 15 million people. They did nothing. But why? When this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for them to step up and do the right thing, for them to be at the very forefront of the correct corporate response to the crisis. For example, announced that they would contribute 5% of all beer sales to help victims or first responders. They would have not only made that back immediately, because alcoholic consumption is up 40% during the crisis, but they would have created incredible value in terms of global goodwill to their brand, people remembering that Corona did the right thing. But sadly, they did not take advantage. Now, contrast that, and by the way, they could have used their very clever imaging and communication, visual communication, for example, to represent proper social distancing with an image like this, with the lime in between the two bottles. Now, contrast that with the way that this company and the CEO of this company responded. Movement Mortgage was also started in the wake of the last crisis in 2008, is the fastest growing mortgage company in the US. And their whole name, obviously, Movement, is about change, disruption, being the leader and shaping the customer experience in ways that were really frustrating before. Now, this is the CEO of this company, and look at how he's communicating in the wake of the crisis and how this is the right way to do it in contrast to Corona's silence.
Hey, movement team, you know, we've been talking a lot about adapting and overcoming, adapting and overcoming, adapting and overcoming in the face of adversity. Well, this market is creating a lot of adversity for a lot of people. And I tell you what, the obstacles that we're facing in the industry right now are going to separate the players from the pretenders. The players, they're the ones that are going to get up, adapt, and overcome. The pretenders, they're going to decide the cost is too high, the work is too much, or they don't have the means or the capability to adapt and overcome the obstacles our industry is throwing at us right now. Movement team, I want you to know you have a lead team that is committed to adapting and overcoming. We love adversity. We love adversity because adversity is an opportunity for us to separate ourselves from the competition. So wake up, know you are part of a winning team. We are waking up, adapting and overcoming to all the changing market conditions right now. I expect you to do the same. From our houses, get up, do our part for America by adapting and overcoming in this new volatile environment so that we can continue to serve American homeowners with excellence and help improve their financial positions in the midst of a tumultuous time. I love you. Keep at it. Keep leading with love.
So hopefully you agree with me that this is the right kind of leadership and corporate response to the crisis. It's full of energy, it's full of empathy, it's full of passion, and it's full of this whole idea of looking at crisis as opportunity, embracing the challenge. I also love the fact that, he's obviously at home, he is exercising with his family in the background, so he's putting it all on the line. And by the way, he is a former American professional football player, so he brings that energy and leader to the way that he engages his stakeholders. So wrap up and then open things up for a Q&A session. So these are the 6 key points that I shared with you that I think allow any organization to shape a culture of reimagining boundaries and therefore to turn the current crisis into opportunity. Started with this idea of just viewing the crisis as a form of extreme disruption, all the way through the 6 steps to understanding that a crisis is an opportunity in disguise, and we can actually grow our market footprint, our business, and our community during this time. So I like to end with a wonderful quote by Steve Denning, who writes or wrote for Forbes magazine. And in one of his articles, he talks about this idea that a firm doesn't find new ways to delight a customer, it creates them. Notice the word delight. He doesn't say satisfy, it's delight. It's that deeper emotional connection. And it's not about a passive process, it's active. It's creating those opportunities. And a crisis gives us the perfect moment to do that because everything can be and has to be reimagined. In strategic thinking, there's no such thing as a mature industry. There's only an industry to which imagination has yet to be applied. And that's the key theme that I've shared with you, that it's all about our ability to engage creative thinking to any business, any situation. And when we do this from the perspective of the customer, which is the key, then opportunities are boundless, they're limitless. And a time like this, when everything is to be reimagined, this is the perfect opportunity to really understand how we want to be part of that, how we want to shape the future of our space, how we want to contribute to our company being able to do that. So let me stop there and turn it over to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you, sir, for such an enlightening session. It was literally has opened a mind to limitless opportunities, I would say. Thank you for that. So the floor is open for questions now, and I would call out the names and you can ask your questions by unmuting yourselves. So can I please request Janam to ask his question first?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
So my question is that, sir, after a certain point, is creativity dependent on appreciation? So are they correlated in any way?
Say the question again. It's clear that what?
Creativity is dependent on appreciation.
What do you mean by appreciation?
Like, sir, if someone appreciates your creativity in certain way, then you will be, you
Yes.
would want to do
Yeah.
it more.
No,
You know?
absolutely. That's a good point. So, and this is why it has to be a whole cultural phenomena within an organization. So remember our survey that I shared with you of the 100,000 people, where only 2% said that their workplace actually encourages creativity, right? That's exactly the point that you're making. If your workplace, if your boss, your management and leadership team doesn't encourage and appreciate creative thinking, then you're not going to do it, right? So that's the whole point, is that this is a cultural phenomena. So when I work with organizations, it's from the top down. So the top have to understand the importance and the power of this. And again, what is positive about a crisis is that this is now not an option. So there's no company that can say, we can keep doing what we've been doing, right? Every single organization now understands that they need to rethink, reimagine their business, which by definition means that they have to creatively look at what they do. And if they have not been equipped or set up until this point to do that, to encourage the creative contribution of everybody that works for them, then this is the time to do it. Otherwise, their future is very much at stake. Okay, so that is absolutely, you're right, that this is only correlated in terms of creative application with the idea of a cultural shift that starts from the top and creating an organization that encourages, appreciates, motivates, and rewards creative thinking.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Janam. May I please request Anirudh to unmute and ask his question?
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, please.
So when it comes to innovating during crisis, we find that companies with larger capital backing can do it and can afford to do it. But whereas if you're a startup and you're really struggling to come up, like resources are on a real shortage. So what would, how would smaller companies handle a crisis in that case?
Right. And, I would almost challenge that. I think that it's much harder for larger companies to innovate in many ways because they are complacent, right? They are large, they can't move as quickly. And this is where I think entrepreneurs and startups actually have an advantage. So I work with companies in terms of the whole range, from startups to the top multinationals. And I can give you one, for example, that comes immediately to mind. I worked with a startup company called Landslide, which wanted to get into the space of Salesforce automation, in which there were other giants. So you had Oracle, you had SaaS, you had Microsoft and Salesforce.com, which were billions and billions of dollars in terms of company revenues and size. So what could this startup do? Well, we used the logic that I shared with you. We identified that all these giants were converging on competing just on the tech platform, how good their technology was. And they forgot about the customer experience, meaning how well did the actual people, the salespeople who were using the platform, how well did they interact with the technology? And when we looked at that, we found that they hated it because they looked at these systems only as monitoring systems by their bosses, by their management. And so we introduced features that turned that pain point into point of delight. So we actually built a database of the best sales experts in the world, which they could access through the website so they could learn how to be better salespeople. Secondly, we put in a VIP function, which was a phone number that they could call after a sales meeting and talk to a live person and basically share or dictate their notes. And that empowered them to feel like they had a personal assistant. So it was that human touch that we introduced. And the result of that was that Landslide was the only company in this market space with all these giants that within 2 years was recognized as the visionary for this market space by the Gartner Group. So that's an example just to kind of contrast to what you said. And again, I think that as entrepreneurs, as startups, you have so much more flexibility, so much more power to see a market space and say, what are they all missing, right? And then build a business that addresses that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anirudh. I'd now like to request Anvesha to ask a question, please.
Hi, Mr. Bhatt. So, while listening to your presentation, a thought just crossed my mind regarding the myopia that a lot of companies have. So, I was wondering what you would say about BlackBerry. When BlackBerry had launched itself, I remember I bought my first BlackBerry with my first salary ever. And that BBM Messenger used to be a whole new craze, and everybody had a BlackBerry in their hands. But slowly, WhatsApp overtook them and completely positioned themselves as indispensable in their stead. And BlackBerry slowly got phased out. How do you think BlackBerry could have handled this better?
Right. Hands up of anybody that has a BlackBerry still.
Still have the old one, don't use it yet.
Do you? Do you? Okay. Maybe as a museum piece, right? As an antique. So this is one of the most fascinating industries, and one that I work in a lot and talk about a lot is mobile telecommunications. Because in the period of 30 years, this market space started by Nokia went from market introduction to market acceptance to market saturation, because by 2013, there were more phones than people in the world, to market transformation. So it's really, if you look at that industry, whatever business you are in, it shows what will happen to your business, right? In an accelerated way. And I had the fortune, for example, of meeting last year in San Diego, Marty Cooper, who actually was the inventor of mobile phones, right? He did this in the 1970s with Motorola, which again didn't realize what it was sitting on, but it was fascinating to talk to someone who created something that basically changed the world, right? But to answer your question, with the BlackBerry and Research in Motion, who made BlackBerry, they had over a 40% market share until 2009 in the US. So they were a dominant player. Within 3 years, they were down to less than 2%. That's how fast that industry moved. And the reason for that, when I have the result of a survey in 2009 when they were still at 40%. And the survey was that when your subscription is up, would you be open to switching away from BlackBerry? And over 50% of the responders said yes. So the writing was on the wall. The question is why? And the answer to that is because BlackBerry was a very functional device, but it was not a fun device, right? And remember what I said, one of the key things is to always continuously expand the definition of your business and the value you provide. So by 2009, the iPhone was introduced in 2007, and that made mobile phones fun, right? It was no longer just about functionality. It was also about personal expression and having fun and communicating with your friends. And BlackBerry didn't understand that fast enough. So when the utility of the phones, mobile phones, expanded to be personal companions, not just business objects, that's when it was a very quick shift away from BlackBerry, because they just could not keep up and they did not provide that sense of value. So that's what they missed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anvesha. Pomali, would you please like to go next?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Hello, sir. Good evening. It was such an
Yes, hi.
insightful session,
Thank you.
and love to hear from you. A lot of insight. So, sir, my question is that I think that professionalism brings a lot of structure in the organization, and it brings in a linear way of thinking too. So, which may hinder creativity in some sense. So, what's your take on that?
Right. Absolutely. It's a balance, right? So an organization by definition is about structure. And structure means that you need to have rules. But we also at the same time need to nurture creativity. And that's not a trade-off. You just need to manage both. So one of the things that this crisis, again, is making clear is that you don't need to have a structure by everybody being physically in one location, right? So now it's telling and showing us that how much more flexibility you can have in an organization with people working effectively from home. Now you no longer are limited to people in your vicinity that you want to hire. You can now go after and bring the best talent from around the world to your organization. Then you have companies, some of these new giants, whether it's Google or Virgin or Nintendo or others, that are showing that you need to build creativity into your structure. So you create workspaces that allow for that. You create motivational systems. So for example, I think at Google, you have 10% of your time is flexible for you to explore new projects, new opportunities, and you're expected to do that. So when you talk about structure, that now becomes part of that structure, right? So you need to accommodate it and not just think about structure as rules and regulations and following orders, but also as one that allows for people's self-expression and creative contribution.
Definitely. So I have one other question to ask that in this changing times, marketing has shifted drastically. Like people are pitching up, like they're becoming more flexible in their brand communication. And the problem is that the more you try to change, it's like the more you remain the same. So it's like flexibility is important, but some way I think that communication is getting lost. It's like too much, like we are actually bringing AR and VR into customer experiences and all, but some way there is a glitch which is still remaining. So how do you think that like bringing it's a counter question to the first question, but uh, how do you think that
Yeah.
the communication can be made more effective even if it's flexible?
Well, that is about, you know, being in the communication field like you are. The idea that you're going to do something that is attention grabbing, that is different, is only part of the equation. You need to understand how to make that count, right? What resonates with your target audience. And so if you incorporate the key concepts that I shared with you, that what you want to really target is what is the key points of frustration, disconnect, and pain that your customers are actually feeling in the experience of that product or service that you are communicating. And in fact, what are the key pain points of the communication process itself? Then you have a wonderful and important point of departure. How do you turn those pain points into points of delight, right? How do you do things in ways that haven't been done before by taking advantage of the innovation shortcut that I mentioned? So within communication, one example is that uh, right now, most of communication is visual. So one study shows that over 85% of communication is visual, and therefore people are overstimulated visually. So if you're going to communicate to them visually, it may not have much impact. So this is why some of the leading brands are looking at other senses, such as the sense of smell, which is the most tied to our sense of memory. How do you communicate a brand essence across the all five senses, right? Now, obviously, if it's just online, that's more challenging, but still doable, because I think one of the best ways of communication is blended, right? So it's something that immerses your target audience in a way that they engage with your brand in multiple touch points. So I worked with one of the leading, which is now one of the leading rums in the world, out of Nicaragua, called Flor de Caña. When I started working with them, they were just known regionally as a very high quality rum, but they did not have a global name or presence. And the way we got them globally recognized, the communication and the strategic platform we built, is to show them as the first rum that you can experience across all 5 senses. So it's not just about the sense of taste, but a sense of smell, sound, touch, every single sense. And so that's one example. And one of the things that I would encourage you to always think about is how can you communicate across all 5 senses and multiple touch points in a way that addresses customer pain points and turns them into points of delight.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That was such a great answer. Thank you.
I would like to please request everyone to keep ask only one question. Thank you. And may I please now request Aishwarya to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Mudrika. Hi, so can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, sure. So what I am trying to understand is, the scope of creativity is determined by commercial targets. I mean, you are a good writer only if you're writing sales. How do you think we can collectively approach this problem? I mean, externally, I understand it's a function of demand. But internally, say, a senior manager not being as scrutinizing of the work you present to them, or how do you think we could possibly overcome it ever, if we can?
Well, let me turn this around and first ask you, what do you think is the answer to this? Having heard me speak as well as your thoughts on this topic, what do you think is the right way of approaching this?
So I personally feel that, since we have more often than not followed a very traditional outlook in terms of, how creative you can actually get. I think now that we have better reception for, actually creative stuff amongst the audience.
Oh, please, I think we're just interrupted, but please continue.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just saying, I think, because we're sort of moving past the traditional way of looking at things and becoming more accepting of, the kind of stuff that's thrown our way, maybe that could be one solution. But again, externally, because I'm talking from my personal experience where I've seen my managers scrutinize every single word entirely based on what sells and what doesn't. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is so true, but because there is a challenge in many organizations. So you have managers who've been there for a long time. They have a certain way of doing things, and that's how they want their team, everybody that works under them, to operate, right?
Yeah.
And that is a challenge. That is absolutely true. So one of the things that I do to overcome that resistance is, for any team that I work with, I ask them a 6-question test. And I say, these 6 questions will expose your self-imposed mental boundaries that is limiting your success personally as well as the growth of the company. And I challenge you that you will not get more than 2 out of the 6 questions correct, right? And that seems very beatable. So most everybody takes that challenge, and I win every time. And these are very basic questions, such as, what business are you in? What do you think should be the goal of innovation? Who do you think are your most important competitors, etc.? So that is my way of doing that, is to get people's mind to open up, to say, wow, this is something that doesn't need to be so confining, that there is much more opportunities that I am aware of. But if you have a boss that is not very creative and doesn't really accept you to contribute creatively, then what I would suggest is make small victories. So create like a small project or a small solution to something that actually shows him or her that what you did is you approached the question differently, that you asked the what if question and came up with a solution that was unexpected or is not a traditional way, and show the power. So that, to me, is what would convince someone that is above you to pay attention, to say that, wow, there is value in creative thinking. But encouragingly, the momentum is on our side because of a crisis like this. Everything that's happening is, again, all pointing to the fact that standing still is not an option. Keep doing what we're doing today is not an option. So hopefully that helps you.
Yeah.
And let me just say that I will need to wrap up in just a couple of minutes. I have my next presentation is to a leadership team in Puerto Rico, of all places. but maybe one or two quick questions more, and then let's wrap up.
Yes, I was just about to ask Mr. Bird because I know there's another session coming up. We only have one last question that we'll be taking right now, if that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yes,
Mudrika?
absolutely. One more.
Yeah, Karthik, can you please ask your question?
Yeah. Hi, sir. Good morning.
Yes, hi. Good morning.
Sir, I just wanted to ask that as per your wide and deep experience, have you witnessed any correlation between creativity and innovation with ethnicity of the place?
Did you say with innovation with?
The relation between innovation or creativity with ethnicity.
How do you define ethnicity, please?
So probably the culture of the place or the region or the origin, does that also some way impact the magnitude of creativity or the kind of creativity a person or an organization probably will have?
Very good question. Very good question. And first of all, I think that diversity in general is huge in terms of sparking creativity. So when I work with my partner organizations, I always ask the most diverse team to participate. And when the leadership team comes together, I ask them to involve some up and coming, lower level, high talented individuals. And then I split them into teams that are as most diverse as possible. So people that usually don't work together get to think together and come up with solutions to the questions that I pose to them. But yeah, I think there are cultural differences. There always are. You know, I come from Central Europe, Eastern Europe, that has a deep tradition of creative thinking because this region has been through such traumatic times and such crises throughout history that it had to adapt to each one very creatively. But I do believe, so there are differences, absolutely, in terms of culture, in terms of the way creativity is applied around the world. My background beside business is psychology. So I've always been very attentive and curious about what truly motivates people to utilize their full creative potential. So my other answer to that is that at the very kind of foundation of that all, I do believe, as I mentioned to you, is that everybody is fundamentally creative, because as children, that is how we operated. That is how we learned the world. And that part of us stays with us. It just gets pushed down and repressed, and a lot of times discouraged as we grow older and we join the workforce. So all we need to do is kind of unleash that, is to reconnect with that sense of creativity and combine that with this wealth of knowledge that we accumulate, and that combination is unbeatable. So yes, there are, I think, cultural differences, and we have to be sensitive and aware of that. But the good news is that fundamentally and underneath it all, we all have this creative ability and creative desire to contribute.
So as we come to the end of day 2, on behalf of the Institute, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Burt for being a part of Comvisage 2020. A subject like reimagining boundaries could not have been more relevant than times like this, where akin to a silver lining, so many new possibilities are springing up. This session itself is a testimony to that fact. And we are so grateful to you, sir, for putting it wonderfully into context. That being said, I remember our first call with sir where he expressed his intent to come visit India someday, and we hope we get to host you on our campus very soon. I now request everyone to please switch on their videos so we can take a group picture.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank
So
you
on behalf of the school, I am very grateful for your session. I mean, I just wanted to say that while the picture was going on. So thank you so much. It was extremely, extremely insightful, very relevant, and the simplicity of the ideas is actually the most profound thing that came across. So thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me, and I love the the interplay, engaging with your community. I think the future is yours, and you have some wonderful minds and possibilities. And you're right. I would love the opportunity, hopefully in the near future, to come visit in person and continue this. So
absolutely look forward. Thank you once again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
guys. Great session, guys. Well done.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yeah. All right. Chalo. See you tomorrow. Now relax. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Also, thank you to our alumni who have joined us today.
Oh, yeah. I think I got a hi from Saurabh and I see Richa. So it's great.
We're so grateful to have them today.
Hello.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Chalo.
I think Ashit, Saurabh and Bhumika had to drop off, but they were also a part of the session.
I think this
Hopefully
is
we'll be there again.
like you guys feel responsible about it, Richa. Huh? Comvisage, right? Now this is like third and the fourth generation. What are they doing? Like that's how these guys look at it. But it's so great, so great. I just got a text from Saurabh in between. It was so nice. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye. Take
Bye.
care.
Good night.
Bye.
Everyone, please fill up the Google sheet that we had, Google doc that we had shared regarding the questions for the panel discussion. We'll close the doc by 9 p.m. today.
While people are still exiting, Mudrika, Shaista, great job today. We had a wonderful day too, and let's all gear up for day 3 tomorrow. Have a good night, sleep well, and see you all bright and early tomorrow at 10:30.
Good night, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
people.
Bye.